Hi there, my name's Henry, I am the Haas Chap, and welcome to the 2022 season recap. We're going to start by going to the very end of 2021. The season had concluded in spectacular fashion with a last race and last lap battle between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Haas F1 Team had introduced two new rookies for the 2021 season, namely Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin. Haas had had a particularly bad year. Their worst year on record, in fact, scoring 0 points and having multiple £1 million crashes. And of course, there had been a signing the previous year with the new title sponsor of Uralkali, a Russian fertilizer manufacturer. 2021 was a pretty abysmal season for Haas F1 Team, but we were assured that the money that was coming from Uralkali was going into the new regulations for 2022. Mick Schumacher's first year in Formula 1 wasn't particularly good, but it was massively overshadowed by the incredibly memeable and hot-headed young Russian of Nikita Mazepin. The 2021 season was over. It was the year that Haas definitely wanted to put behind them. After the season concluded in Abu Dhabi, the teams were all staying on to make sure that they did the Pirelli tyre tests for 2022. Pirelli were bringing a new 18-inch wheel along with the new regulations from the FIA, so there was deep investigation needed as to see whether or not these new tyres were going to be up to any good or not. So once again, before the teams could get down to some well-deserved R&R, the Yas Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi was once again filled with the sweet, sweet sound of Formula 1 cars. My, what a surprise! For the post-season testing of 2021, we had in the seat Robert Schwartzman and Pietro Fittipaldi. Amazingly, Pietro Fittipaldi came in at P10, and Robert Schwartzman, he was at the top of the table. This certainly was a surprise, considering the year that Haas F1 Team had had. I wasn't entirely sure what to think of it. I wasn't sure whether or not it was particularly representative of the cars on the grid at the time, or if it was something to do with the new tyres, or if there was some sort of setup change that we had done. But to go from dead last to the top in testing was certainly a surprise. 2021 was supposed to be the start of the new regulations. However, because of the pandemic, it was pushed back a year to 2022. We enter the early months of 2022, and this can only mean one thing: car launches. Haas F1 Team were right off the starting block, the first ones out of the paddock, and it was a tweet. That's all it was. Yes, Haas F1 Team didn't go for a fancy, glitzy car release to show off their brand spanking new car off to the world. It was a tweet of 3 computer-generated images. On first impressions, didn't look too bad. There was definitely a sense of Russian influence within the livery, but overall, didn't look too bad. Nobody had done any testing yet of the 2022 cars in anger, so we were looking hopeful. Unfortunately, in the same time period, a crisis was developing in Europe. We moved to testing in Barcelona, and these unfortunately have ramped up significantly. And considering who the team were being sponsored by, all eyes were on us. Not only that, but we had shipping delays, delaying the transportation of our car, our components, all of our essential gear out to Barcelona. We arrived a day late. Considering the growing state of turmoil in Europe at the time, there was really only one thing that Haas F1 Team could do, and thankfully they did it. It was announced that their sponsor Uralkali and their driver Nikita Mazepin were dropped. Now, to many, this was a good thing, but the news had been confirmed. But there was another great question: what was the future for the team? Without a main title sponsor, surely it was unlikely that Haas F1 weren't going to be able to continue. We were, however, reassured by both Gene Haas and Günther Steiner that the Haas F1 Team were indeed continuing. This is a team that's still in it. All of the major title sponsor had been ripped from the car. all those decals, all of the colours. It was just down to a nice simple black, white and red livery. Actually looked really good. So with a vacant seat at the team, what were we to do? There were several options we could have gone down. Could have had another rookie. Could have brought in Pietro Fittipaldi. Then an Instagram post was dropped and everything sort of changed. Kevin Magnussen was back. Yes, thankfully, the team had decided to bring back Kevin Magnussen. As a bit of context, at the end of 2020, Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean, our drivers at the time, were unfortunately dropped for Nikita Mazepin and for Mick Schumacher. In an interview with Tom Clarkson, Kevin Magnussen had made it perfectly clear that the termination of the contract and the end of their relationship with Haas was fairly amicable. He was back. Kevin Magnussen was back. I don't think I'd ever felt so elated in my life. Actually, I probably have. Probably proposing to my fiancée, but gloss over that. He'd had a year out of Formula One, hadn't had a year out of racing, but certainly he was treading into some pretty deep waters. Having only had a moment's notice to get all the way over to Bahrain for the first race was an incredible feat. Here we go. 2022 season had begun. Kevin Magnussen had put in a phenomenal job and he qualified in P7. Considering where we were last year, this was a real moment to celebrate. The first race got underway. It was incredible scenes. Ferrari at the front, Mercedes having issues with porpoising, Red Bull double DNFing, McLaren at the back of the pack. And where was Haas? For the first race of the year, Haas finished P5, P11. I'm going to say that again. Haas F1 Team, 2021's laughing stock, had finished in P5. The scenes were absolutely incredible. It was such a major turning point for the team. We move on to round 2, Saudi Arabia and Jeddah. Entering the second race on an incredible high, all eyes were on Haas F1 to put in another good performance. And you know what? It actually wasn't that bad. Mick Schumacher, in his best wisdom, did decide that he didn't want the car in one piece anymore, and he decided to split it in two. Jeddah is a relatively new circuit, incredibly tight and unforgiving. So, I mean, there have been several incidents there. You think of Max Verstappen in his qualifying in last year. You think of also the fact that this wasn't Mick Schumacher's first time wrecking the car in Jeddah. But K-Mag thankfully managed to squeeze in P9, securing us another 2 points. So we'll move on to Imola now, the first of 2 Italian Grand Prix. The team had taken a bit of a hit from the last race. Those sorts of crashes cost an incredible amount of money. Kevin Magnussen had managed to put in the team's best ever qualifying result, P4. This was also the first of 3 sprint races over the 2022 season. During the sprint race, unfortunately, Kevin Magnussen did drop off a little bit, but he stuck it in P8, scoring us another point. For the main Grand Prix, we dropped another place. However, that's still another 2 points in the bag for the World Constructors' Championships. Back to Barcelona, and this is a very important one for Mick Schumacher, his first ever Q3 appearance. But we didn't get any points. Let's move on. The jewel in the crown is next, Monaco, possibly one of the most recognisable and famous circuits in the Formula One calendar. This was probably another weekend to forget. Mick Schumacher had another enormous incident, deciding that his car, his chassis was not fit for this earth. It was also a race where we double DNF'd, so yeah, let's forget that one, shall we? The Silverstone Grand Prix. There were a lot of eyes on Mick Schumacher. Throughout the year, there have been several questions as to when is he going to get his first points. We had been several races in at this point, and it wasn't looking brilliant. We hadn't qualified particularly well in Silverstone. We weren't really expecting anything special. But that was not the case. Immense scenes on lap 1. It wasn't looking amazing, but we had taken great advantage of the strategy, of the safety cars, and of where the other teams were sitting at that point. Bringing home Mick Schumacher's first points in an amazing last lap battle with a damaged Max Verstappen for P7, Mick Schumacher came home in P8 to score his first ever points in his Formula 1 career. Not long after him, Kevin Magnussen crossed the line in P10, double points finish. It was certainly a weekend to remember. Mick Schumacher getting his first points, a double points finish for the team. We were elated. Could we do it again though? In Austria, yet another sprint weekend, Haas F1 were looking incredibly strong. Being such a high downforce circuit in such a short one at that, it was a great opportunity for the team to really capitalise on our high downforce car. Mick was less impressed with the result of the sprint race. Despite valiant efforts and some rather choice words over the team radio, Mick Schumacher did not finish in the points in the sprint race. Kevin Magnussen did finish in P8. That was about to change. Mick Schumacher had got his taste of points and he definitely wanted more. Very evidently by the post-race interviews, Mick Schumacher was not a happy bunny. And with that grit and determination, Mick Schumacher, for the actual race itself, he managed to get his best ever result in P6. Kevin Magnussen, yet again, only 2 places behind in P8. Another double points finish for the team. What is going on? Let's jump over to France, and probably for the least anticipated race of this series. There was one thing that was fairly notable, Kevin Magnussen getting in P10, but apart from that, it was another fairly bland weekend. If we look at the next race, Hungary, last year, that was an amazing race. Valtteri Bottas deciding to go bowling in turn 1, and Esteban Ocon getting his first ever win in Formula 1. Was it going to be like this year? No. No. Again, for the Haas F1 team, it was another no points finish. You could probably say it with me now. Let's move on. Let's head over now to Zandvoort, the Dutch GP. There were some predictions that it was going to be fairly similar to Austria, with a lot of twists and turns and high banked corners, but again, it just didn't really work out for us. There were some fairly interesting moments from other teams now, with Yuki Tsunoda and his failure. Not failure. Is it failure? Not failure. Is it a failure? All the smoke, pigeons on the track, the thing with George Russell, and his decisions over what he should be doing in terms of strategy over Lewis Hamilton. But again, this was a weekend with no more points. This was also the weekend where I dipped my toes into Formula 1 podcasting for the first time by being a guest with the guys over in the Americas, the Haas boys. It was also at this weekend at the Dutch GP that we learned that Mick Schumacher's relationship with Ferrari Driver Academy was going to come to an end at the end of 2022. This raised some eyebrows and a lot of speculation that would continue for the rest of the season. Is Mick Schumacher going to be staying with Haas F1 for next year? Let's head over to Asia now and to the Singapore Grand Prix. Kevin Magnussen had made another Q3 appearance in qualifying. Things were looking quite good. However, not for the first time this season. There was an issue with Kevin Magnussen's front wing end plate. For the third time this year, Kevin Magnussen was showed the black and orange flag reported by another team to go into the pits and change his front wing, therefore completely ruining his race. Despite the front wing end plate still being attached to the car at the time, not really causing much in the way of concern of any sort of danger, the FIA did call in Kevin Magnussen to have his front wing end changed. This becomes particularly notable at the next race. Heading back over to America for the next race, we head to Austin, Texas and the Circuit of the Americas. There was a new livery to celebrate this, there was a new race suit as well, and they look really good. Considering that this was the team's home race, as it were, it wasn't particularly amazing at first. There was the incident with Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, and of course we cannot forget that last lap battle between Sebastian Vettel and Kevin Magnussen, because that last portion of our race was fairly fantastic. Kevin was fighting for P8. Unfortunately, at the last couple of corners, Sebastian Vettel had managed to catch him up from a 10-second gap to pass him to secure him P8 and for us P9. Now, I did go over the fact about how our damage has been dealt with by the FIA and the damage that was dealt with for Fernando Alonso and Sergio Perez, COTA, in a different video. If you want to go and watch that, pause the video now and go check out my review for the COTA race review. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to head to a really important one. Interlagos. Probably one of the best circuits of the year, and my what a weekend it resulted in. The last sprint race of the year as well. Haas F1 Team had done incredibly well, scoring in every single one so far. Could we keep it up again? We go to qualifying to line up the grid for the sprint race. Whenever there's been a wet weekend, it's been met with some dread. Japan, Suzuka, immense controversy over the incident with Pierre Gasly and the tractor on track. The race was delayed for an hour, quite rightly so, but rain really hasn't been on our side really ever since Spa of last year. So I had watched Q1 and Q2 for Interlagos, and Q3 was just as my food was ready. When I got a text message from one of my best friends to say that Kevin Magnussen was on pole position, I was genuinely lost for words. We've never experienced this sort of high before. Hopefully we will again. And so the sprint race, yet again continuing a trend for the Haas F1 team. We finish in the points, securing P8. So for that one, I think that's way more forgivable for going from pole position all the way down to P8. We were at the end of the year. Teams have been continuously developing their cars, and we had only brought a couple of upgrades throughout the entire season. Yet we were still that competitive. It was, I think, true testament to the people back in the factories and in the garage. But then we know what happened in the race. With Daniel Ricciardo going into the back of Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher not really having an amazing weekend. It was so disappointing. We were on such a high on the first 2 days. But though we come to the end of the year, Abu Dhabi, the last race, not an exciting race by any means. There was the fight for who would get P2 in the Drivers' Championships. But Haas F1 team, we weren't really anywhere near anyone. It was disappointing for sure, but it was also a time to reflect on the incredible steps that we as a team have made this year. I go back again to 2021, and if you remember, at the beginning of this year, we still had Nikita Mazepin, and we were to end the year in P8 in the Constructors' Championships, beating AlphaTauri, and also getting 2 double points finishes, our first in 3 years, and also our first ever pole position. I think this is definitely the year where the team turns itself around. There are a few races I've omitted from this review where we didn't really get any points. I've covered the ones that have been more specific to the team. There are some other points to look at as well. Let's not forget that Mick Schumacher is not driving for Haas next year. That's right, shortly before the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, it was announced that Nico Hülkenberg, former Aston Martin reserve driver, is going to be alongside Kevin Magnussen for next year. I understand that there are fans that are really disappointed that Mick Schumacher is not coming back for Haas F1 at least for next year. At time of recording, it's still being considered whether or not Mick Schumacher is going to be the reserve for Mercedes for next year. We've also got Pietro Fittipaldi returning as the reserve driver for next year too. So our new lineup is of Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, Pietro Fittipaldi, and still at the top is Gunther. Anyone who's not heard this news, Gunther Steiner is releasing a book next year, Surviving to Drive, coming in about April time. That's going to be a good read. It's really been one of those years for Haas F1 of a real up and down, topsy-turvy. I do wonder whether or not we needed that year at the bottom to give ourselves a bit of a reality check. So there you are. 2022 season has long gone now. I will also be recording a video to cover the Formula 1 Esports Pro Championship Series. At the moment, Thomas Ronhaar, who is our number one driver, he's currently in P2 in the Drivers' Championships, and we are currently P4 in the Constructors. Not in for a shout for first place, really, that's gone. But if we could get top 3, that'd still be really great. I'd also like to take a moment to thank you for watching this series. I know it's a bit janky, I know it's a bit messy, I know it's a bit sloppy, but for next year I'm definitely aiming to improve my production value, to try and get things out a bit more regularly, to have some more interesting conversations between you and I, because really what I want for this channel is to grow the community of Haas F1 teams all over the world. And I really hope that this is the space where you come and talk to me about this sort of stuff. On that note, if you want to contact me, if you've got any questions, even if you want to feature in a future episode, please do email me at thehaaschap@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at thehaaschap. If you've got any suggestions for video ideas, that'd be great. I've had some ideas along the lines of covering doing sort of like a driver bio for each driver that's going to be driving for us next year. I'd also like to do a short debrief on Gunther Steiner and for Gene Haas. So our previous drivers, I would include Esteban Gutierrez, Roman Grosjean, and now Mick Schumacher. Maybe some other content like covering music in Formula 1. That's one that really interests me. You know what I'm hoping for 2023? I'm hoping for more success for the Haas F1 team. It's been so great to be behind this small ragtag bunch of miscreants. I will also be carrying on the Creator of the Week. So if you've got any suggestions for who you think should be Creator of the Week, please, again, send them to my email or let me know via Instagram. That's about it from me. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, very good New Year as well, and I will see you next time.